The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the Ashfords' private airfield. The garden party was in full swing, filled with the clinking of crystal and the soft hum of high society gossip. Rebecca Ashford stood in the center of a circle of women, her bright red dress shimmering like a fresh wound against the green grass. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Still no sign of our guest of honor," Rebecca said, tilting her head back to finish her drink. Her blonde hair caught the light as she gestured vaguely toward the empty runway. "I suppose we should have expected this. The bus service out here is notoriously slow on Saturdays. Can you imagine her trying to navigate the security gate in some moth-eaten coat?" Her friends erupted in giggles, one of them even pulling out her phone. "I've been waiting for hours to get this on camera," the woman whispered. "The maid at the airfield. It's going to be the most viral thing I've ever posted. I hope she wore something truly hideous." "Oh, she will," Rebecca promised, her eyes scanning the horizon for a taxi or a beat-up sedan. "I told her to wear whatever she had." Knowing Zerai, that's probably a polyester rag she found in a bargain bin. She's probably sitting at a bus stop right now, clutching that gold-trimmed invitation like it's a ticket to heaven. But the laughter didn't last. A low, deep vibration started in the ground, rattling the stems of the champagne flutes on the nearby tables. It wasn't the sound of a bus or a car. It was a heavy, mechanical thunder that seemed to shake the very air in their lungs. "What is that?" someone shouted, shielding their eyes from the glare of the setting sun. Rebecca frowned, looking up. On the horizon, a speck of black and chrome appeared, growing larger with terrifying speed. It wasn't a small propeller plane like the ones the Ashfords owned. This was a titan of the skies, a long-range, custom-built private jet that screamed of wealth that went beyond billions. As the massive aircraft banked toward the runway, the sunlight hit the tail fin, revealing a sharp, aggressive logo in shimmering gold. The Vasquan insignia. The wind from the massive turbines whipped across the party, knocking over floral arrangements and sending napkins flying like white birds. Rebecca stood frozen, her hand clutching her pearls as the jet's tires screamed against the tarmac. The roar faded into a high-pitched whine as the plane turned, taxiing directly toward the main tent. The engines cut out, and a sudden, heavy silence fell over the airfield. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a bus. This was an invasion. And as the gold-plated stairs began to lower, she realized the joke wasn't on the maid anymore. The joke was on her. The golden stairs of the jet clicked into place, and the heavy cabin door swung open. For a heartbeat, there was only the cooling hiss of the engines. Then, a man stepped out into the twilight. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that looked like it had been carved from shadows, and he carried an aura of absolute, terrifying power. Quantarian didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the expensive catering or the stunned billionaires. His eyes were locked on one person, Zerai. He descended the stairs with a predator's grace, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the tarmac. When he reached the bottom, he stopped in front of Zerai and took her hand. He didn't just shake it, he bowed his head slightly and pressed a lingering, respectful kiss to her knuckles. "I believe you dropped this, my queen," he murmured, his voice carrying through the silent airfield like a low roll of thunder. He handed her a clutch made of the same royal blue silk as her gown. Rebecca Ashford's mouth hung open. "Tarion." "Quan," she whispered, her voice cracking. She looked at her husband, Marcus, whose face had turned a sickly shade of gray. Marcus wasn't just shocked, he looked like he was about to vomit. He knew exactly who that man was. He knew the Vasquan syndicate didn't just run the underworld, they ran the banks that held the Ashford tech empire together. "Marcus," Rebecca hissed, grabbing her husband's arm. "Do something. Tell them they can't park that thing here. Tell that woman to leave." "Shut up, Rebecca." Marcus snapped, his voice trembling with a fear she had never heard before. He stepped forward, his legs shaking, and bowed so low his forehead almost touched his knees. "Mr. Quan. We had no idea. There must be some mistake. We were just hosting a small gathering for the staff." Tarion finally turned his gaze toward them. It was like a cold wind had swept across the airfield. He didn't say a word to Rebecca. He looked directly at Marcus. My wife tells me she spent 6 months cleaning your floors, Marcus, Tyrion said, his voice dangerously smooth. She tells me your wife thought it would be hilarious to invite her here to mock her poverty. I didn't know. Rebecca stammered, stepping back. She was just the maid. She didn't say. She didn't have to say anything, Tyrion interrupted, his eyes flashing with a lethal light. Her character spoke for her. Yours, however, has spoken quite loudly tonight. He turned back to Zerai, his expression softening instantly. The Ashfords owe our family $300 million in high-interest loans, Zerai. Should I call them in tonight, or should we wait until Monday morning to watch them lose everything? The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca looked at Zerai, the woman she had called nothing just days ago, and realized that the maid didn't just have a $100 million jet. She had the power to end Rebecca's life as she knew it with a single nod of her head. The color didn't just leave Marcus Ashford's face, it seemed to drain from his entire life. He looked at the royal blue gown, then at the massive jet, and finally at the cold, predatory eyes of Tyrion. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His wife hadn't just insulted a servant, she had spat in the face of the syndicate. 300 million, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking so loudly it carried to the guests who were already frantically checking their phones. Rebecca, what have you done? Marcus, don't be dramatic, Rebecca stammered, though her hands were shaking so hard she dropped her clutch. She's Zerai. She's the girl from the shoe closet. She probably tricked him. Marcus turned on her then, his face twisting into a mask of pure rage. He didn't care about the cameras or the elite guests watching their downfall in real time. Tricked him? Look at the insignia, you fool. That's the Vasquan crest. You spent 6 months treating the most powerful woman in the underworld like a dog because you wanted to feel big? I didn't know, she shrieked, but her voice was drowned out by a chorus of frantic gasps from the crowd. The stock, someone yelled from the back, holding up a glowing screen. Ashford Tech is cratering. Someone just dumped 40% of the shares. Marcus staggered, nearly falling over a floral arrangement. He knew that someone was Tyrion. With a single text message, the syndicate had pulled the rug out from under his life's work. The elite friends who had been laughing with Rebecca moments ago were already backing away, deleting their selfies and whispering in disgust. Marcus ignored them all and fell to his knees on the hard tarmac, right at Zerai's feet. Mrs. Kwan. Zerai, please, he sobbed, the billionaire tech giant reduced to a begging child. My wife is a cruel, stupid woman. I'll give you anything. I'll sign over the estate. I'll fire everyone who looked at you the wrong way. Just please, don't call in the debt. It will kill us. We'll be on the streets by morning. Rebecca stood frozen, her bright red dress looking cheap and garish in the shadow of the jet. She watched her husband groan in the dirt, pleading with the woman she had forced to scrub wine stains just days ago. Zerai looked down at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't look triumphant or angry, she looked disappointed. She looked at Tyrion, who was waiting for her signal to finish the job. The power to destroy a family, a business, and a legacy was resting entirely in her bruised, scarred hands. You're right, Marcus, Zerai said, her voice quiet but cutting through the wind. She is a cruel woman. But you watched her do it. You let her treat people as invisible because it made your life easier. She stepped back, letting the hem of her $2 million dress brush against Marcus's reaching hands. The Ashford empire wasn't just crumbling, it was being erased. And for the first time in her life, Rebecca Ashford felt truly invisible. The dust had barely settled on the Ashfords' bankruptcy when Zerai returned to the mansion. The gates that once required her to wait for a security clearance now swung open automatically at the sight of her black armored SUV. The house was quiet, the army of caterers and elite friends having vanished the moment the money did. Zerai walked through the front door, her heels clicking against the marble she had spent months polishing. She found Rebecca in the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. The blonde woman was wearing a simple tracksuit, her eyes red-rimmed and her hair unwashed. She looked smaller, stripped of the designer armor that had once made her feel invincible. When she saw Zerai, she didn't scream or mock. She simply looked down at her hands, which were stained with dust from packing. "I signed the papers this morning," Zerai said quietly, her voice echoing in the hollow room. "I bought the estate. My foundation will be turning this place into a training center and housing for domestic workers who have been mistreated by employers like you." Rebecca let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "So, this is it? Your big revenge? You take my house and turn it into a dorm for maids?" "It's not revenge, Rebecca. It's a correction," Zerai replied, stepping closer. She looked at the spot on the rug where she had once knelt to scrub red wine while Rebecca laughed. "You spent 6 months trying to break me because you thought I was poor and weak. You thought that because I served you, I was less than you." Zerai held up her hands. The bruises had faded, but the memory of the work remained. "The people you call poor are the strongest people in this world. They survive on nothing. They work until their bones ache just to feed their families. They are invisible to people like you, but they see everything. They see your character when you think no one is watching." Rebecca looked up, a tear finally tracking through the dust on her cheek. "I lost everything because of a joke." "No," Zerai corrected her firmly. "You lost everything because you forgot that wealth is just a coat you put on. Character is what's underneath. I could have destroyed you the first day I arrived, but I wanted to see if there was any kindness in you. There wasn't." Zerai turned toward the door, her royal blue coat billowing behind her. "You used to tell me to look at the sky I'd never reach. Now, you're the one on the ground. I hope while you're down there, you finally learn how to look people in the eye." As Zerai walked out, she didn't look back. She had entered this house to find her soul, and she was leaving with it fully intact. Rebecca Ashford was left in the silence of a house that no longer belonged to her, finally understanding what it felt like to be completely, utterly invisible. The grand ballroom of the Vasquan headquarters was filled with light, but the guests were different this time. There were no arrogant billionaires or cruel socialites looking for someone to mock. Instead, the front rows were filled with housekeepers, nannies, and drivers, the people who kept the world running while remaining invisible. Zerai stood at the podium, her royal blue gown shimmering under the chandeliers. Beside her, Tarion stood like a silent shadow, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. To the world, he was a man of violence and secrets, but tonight, he was the silent partner in a different kind of revolution. "For 6 months, I lived your life," Zerai said, her voice clear and steady, reaching every corner of the room. "I felt the ache in my back and the sting of chemicals on my hands. I saw how people look through you when they think you have no power. But tonight, I am here to tell you that you are seen." She gestured to the large screen behind her, which displayed the plans for the Invisible Workforce Foundation. It wasn't just a charity, it was a shield. It provided legal protection, education scholarships, and emergency housing for workers who had been mistreated by the elite. The Ashford Mansion, once a symbol of cruelty, was now the foundation's headquarters, a place of rest for the weary. "People told me that power is about how many people you can step on," Zerai continued, catching Tarion's proud gaze. "But my husband and I have learned that true power is about how many people you can lift up. Our name used to strike fear into hearts. From now on, I want it to provide hope." The room erupted into applause, a sound more genuine than any fake laughter Zerai had heard at the Ashford brunch. As she stepped down from the stage, a young woman in a simple uniform approached her with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Kwan. No one has ever fought for us before." Zerai took the woman's calloused hand in her own, her skin radiant and warm. "We fight for each other now," she whispered. As the night wound down, Tarion leaned into her ear, his voice a low rumble. "You did it, Zerai. You kept your soul, and you changed mine in the process. Are you ready to go home?" Zerai looked around the room at the smiling faces of the people she had once served. She had entered a billionaire's world to prove she wasn't just a title, and she was leaving it as something much greater. She was the mafia boss's wife, yes, but she was also a hero to the invisible. "I am home, Tarion," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. The $100 million jet and the crystal gowns were just tools. The real wealth was the respect she had earned and the lives she had changed. The experiment was over, but her new reign had just begun.